The chains bit into Elena's wrists as the dragon guards shoved her through obsidian doors. She stumbled into a chamber vast enough to swallow cathedrals, lit by rivers of molten gold flowing through channels in the black stone floor. At the far end, on a throne carved from a single ruby, sat Emperor Valerix. His scales gleamed like hammered copper, each one the size of a shield. His eyes, ancient and burning, fixed on her with an intensity that made her knees weaken. "The human offering," one guard announced, his voice a rumble of grinding boulders. Elena forced herself to stand straight despite the terror screaming through her veins. Her village depended on this. 200 souls held in dragon dungeons, waiting to see if their sacrifice would buy their freedom. Valerix rose, and the movement sent tremors through the floor. He descended the steps with fluid grace, stopping 10 feet away. This close, Elena could see the grief carved into the ancient features of his face, the way his massive clawed hands trembled slightly. "You are a mother," he said. "Not a question. I was." Elena's voice cracked. "My daughter died in the war, your war. Then you understand loss." Valerix turned, gesturing for her to follow. "Come." They walked through corridors lined with treasures from 1,000 conquered worlds until they reached a smaller chamber, warm and dimly lit. In the center, on a bed of golden silk, lay 2 creatures no larger than house cats, dragon cubs. Their scales were still soft, translucent, showing the flutter of tiny hearts beneath. They mewled weakly, reaching toward Valerix with underdeveloped claws. "Their mother died bringing them into this world 3 days ago," Valerix said, his voice hollow. "They refuse all sustenance. The court physicians say they will die before the week ends unless—" He paused, and Elena saw the proud emperor struggle with the words. "Unless they accept a nurse, a wet nurse, someone who is recently born young." Elena's hand went to her chest instinctively. She'd stopped producing milk months ago, after little Maya's death. "I can't. I haven't. Dragon magic can rekindle what was lost," Valerix interrupted. "If you consent. If you save my sons, your people go free. If you refuse, or if you fail—" He didn't finish the sentence. Elena looked at the cubs. They were so small, so fragile. Nothing like the monsters that had burned her village, killed her husband, stolen her child's future. One of them turned its head toward her, and its eyes, bright copper like its father's, locked onto hers. In that gaze, she saw the same desperate hunger for life she'd seen in Maya's eyes during those final, terrible hours. "What must I do?" Elena whispered. The ritual was excruciating. Dragon priestesses chanted in languages older than mountains while marking Elena's skin with glowing sigils. Power flowed through her like liquid fire, reshaping, remembering, restoring. When it ended, she collapsed, gasping, as her body responded to the ancient magic. They brought the cubs to her immediately. The smaller one, barely breathing, was placed in her arms first. Elena guided him to nurse, and after a heart-stopping moment, he latched on. The sensation was strange, uncomfortable, but also achingly familiar. The second cub, stronger and more demanding, followed his brother. As they fed, Elena felt something impossible. A warmth spread from where the cubs touched her skin, seeping into her chest, her heart. Not physical heat, but something else. Recognition, connection, bond. "They have chosen you," one priestess whispered, awe and fear mixing in her voice. "No dragon has bonded with a human in 10,000 years." Valerix stood at the chamber's entrance, watching. For the first time since Elena had arrived, she saw something other than grief in his eyes. Hope, fragile as spring ice, but there nonetheless. The days blurred together. Elena existed in the nursery chamber, caring for the cubs around the clock. She learned their differences quickly. The smaller one, whom she privately named Ash for his silver-gray scales, was gentle and cautious, always watching with intelligent eyes. The larger, whom she called Ember for his reddish-gold coloring, was bold and demanding, constantly testing the boundaries of his small world. The dragon court watched her with undisguised hostility. Servants delivered food and supplies without meeting her eyes. Guards stood outside the chamber. their contempt palpable even through the door. Only Valerix visited, always silent, always watching his sons with an expression Elena couldn't quite read. On the 8th night, Elena sang to the cubs as they settled for sleep, an old human lullaby her grandmother had taught her about stars and sailing ships and coming home. Ash chirped softly in response, and Ember's tail curled around her wrist. "I did not know humans could make such sounds," Valerix said from the doorway. Elena jumped, nearly waking the cubs. "It's just a song to help them sleep. My mate used to hum to them." Before Valerix entered the chamber, moving with careful silence despite his massive size, "They seem content." "They're good boys," Elena said, surprised by the fierceness in her voice. "Strong, smart. They'll be powerful someday, if they survive." Valerix knelt beside the silk bed, extending one claw to gently stroke Ember's head. The cub mumbled in his sleep, leaning into the touch. "There are those in the court who see them as weak, tainted by human contact, who would prefer they not reach maturity." Elena's blood went cold. "You're saying someone might hurt them?" "I am saying you should be vigilant. Always." Valerix met her eyes. "I have declared you under imperial protection, but even an emperor's word has limits when tradition and pride are involved." That night, Elena barely slept. She kept the cubs close, one hand always on them, her senses straining at every sound. 2 weeks later, Ash fell ill. He refused to nurse, his breathing rapid and shallow, his soft scales burning with fever. Elena sent for the court physicians, but they came slowly, their examinations cursory and dismissive. "Dragon cubs often die in their first month," one said with a shrug. "The weak are culled naturally." "He's not weak," Elena snapped. "He's sick." "There's a difference. Now help him." The physician's eyes narrowed. "You forget your place, human. These are not your young." "Then whose are they?" Elena stood, cradling the feverish Ash against her chest. "Their fathers. He left them in my care. Their mothers. She's dead." "The courts? You just said you'd let them die." "So yes, they're mine, and I'm not letting this one go without a fight." She dismissed the physicians and worked through the night, doing everything she could remember from Maya's illnesses. Cool cloths to bring down the fever, small amounts of liquid to prevent dehydration, and songs. Constant, steady songs in human words that somehow seemed to soothe the suffering cub. Ember stayed pressed against his brother, making distressed sounds whenever Elena had to move Ash for care. The bond between the twins was already evident, deep and instinctive. On the 3rd day of Ash's illness, Elena felt her own strength failing. She hadn't eaten or slept properly, her entire focus on keeping the small creature alive. Ash's breathing had grown dangerously weak. "Please," Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Please don't leave. Your brother needs you. Your father needs you. I need you." Ash's copper eyes opened, focusing on her with effort. His small mouth opened, and the faintest chirp emerged. Then his breathing steadied. The fever broke, and he nuzzled weakly into her hand. Elena sobbed with relief, holding both cubs close while Ember licked his brother's face with obvious joy. Valerix found them that way an hour later. He said nothing, but Elena saw his throat work as he swallowed hard. He reached out, and for the first time, Elena placed one of his sons in his arms without hesitation. "You saved him," Valerix said quietly. "He saved himself. He's a fighter, like his nurse." Valerix looked at her, and Elena saw something shift in his expression. "The court will not like this. A human proving more devoted than dragon physicians." "I don't care what the court likes." A sound rumbled from Valerix's chest. It took Elena a moment to realize he was laughing. "No, I suppose you do not." The assassination attempt came 3 weeks later, swift and vicious. Elena had just finished the evening feeding when she noticed the unusual silence. The guards who normally stood outside the chamber were gone. Her instincts, honed by months of living in a war zone, screamed danger. She gathered both cubs quickly, backing toward the corner of the chamber farthest from the door. Ash and Ember sensed her fear, making anxious sounds and pressing against her. The door opened. 3 dragons in noble dress entered, their eyes cold and purposeful. Elena recognized Lord Tyrax, one of Valerix's chief rivals, his scales midnight blue and scarred from countless battles. "The human nurse," Tyrax said, his voice dripping with contempt. "How convenient to find you with the abominations." "They're not abominations. They're children." Elena's voice was steady despite her terror. "They are weak, corrupted, bonded to livestock." Tyrax advanced, and the other 2 dragons fanned out to cut off escape routes. "The Empire cannot be ruled by such tainted blood. Better they die now, in infancy, than shame us later. You'll have to go through me first." Tyrax laughed. "That was always the plan, human." He lunged faster than Elena thought possible for something so large. She dove aside, clutching the cubs, but felt claws rake across her back. Pain exploded through her, and she stumbled, falling. The cubs tumbled from her arms. The second dragon raised a clawed foot to crush Ash. Elena threw herself forward, taking the strike meant for the cub. She heard ribs crack, tasted blood, but she'd bought seconds, and in those seconds something miraculous happened. Ember and Ash, barely 6 weeks old, opened their mouths and breathed fire. It wasn't much, small gouts of flame no larger than candles, but dragons weren't supposed to breathe fire until their first year at the earliest. The shock froze the assassins for a critical moment. Alarms blared. Guards poured into the chamber. Valerix arrived like a storm, his rage terrible to behold. The fight was brief and brutal. 2 assassins died. Tyrax was chained. Elena didn't see the end. Her vision had already gone dark, the venom from Tyrax's claws spreading through her system like ice. She woke 3 days later in a chamber far grander than the nursery. Sunlight streamed through crystal windows. Her wounds had been carefully tended, wrapped in silk bandages that glowed faintly with healing magic. Valerix sat beside her bed, and in his arms were Ash and Ember, noticeably larger than when she'd last seen them. They chirped excitedly when her eyes opened, scrambling out of their father's grip to cuddle against her. "Easy," Valerix cautioned them gently. "She is still healing." "The cubs," Elena rasped, "are they unharmed, thanks to you?" Valerix helped her sit up carefully. "The venom should have killed you. Dragon venom has no antidote for humans. Yet you survived. The court physicians believe the bond with my sons somehow protected you, gave you partial immunity." He paused. "You have changed, Elena. Become something between human and dragon. Neither, and both." Elena looked at her hands. The skin seemed slightly tougher, with a faint iridescent sheen. She could feel the cubs' emotions now, their relief and joy at her waking, as clearly as her own. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now I make formal what has already become truth." Valerix stood, his voice taking on the weight of imperial decree. "You are no longer a prisoner or servant. You are guardian, protector, and mother to the imperial heirs. You will be known as Elena Flame-Blessed, and any who threaten you threaten the throne itself. The court will hate this. The court already hates this, but they will learn to accept it, or they will be removed." Valerix's eyes blazed. "My sons need you. The Empire needs what you represent, even if it does not yet understand." Over the following weeks, Elena learned her new role. She trained with dragon warriors, learning to fight with weapons and without. The venom change had made her stronger, faster, her senses sharper. She could hear whispers from distant corridors, smell deception on the wind. Ash and Ember grew rapidly, soon reaching the size of wolves. Their bond with Elena deepened daily. They followed her everywhere, learning from her as much as from their dragon tutors. She taught them human concepts of mercy and strategy. They taught her to feel the flow of magic, to sense danger before it struck. That the court's resentment festered. Nobles muttered about the human queen who wasn't a queen, the corrupted heirs, the emperor who had lost his way. Elena heard the whispers and prepared. She knew another attack would come. The only question was when. The answer came 4 months after the first assassination attempt. A full rebellion, led by Lord Carvax, Tyrax's brother, with support from half the noble houses. They struck at night, overwhelming the loyal guards through sheer numbers. Elena woke to the sound of battle. She grabbed Ash and Ember, both now large enough to be dangerous, but still too young to fight an army, and ran. The secret passages Valerix had shown her led deep into the mountain, toward escape routes that opened into human territory. But the rebels had anticipated this. They were waiting in the tunnels. "End of the road, flame blessed," Carvax sneered. His forces filled the passage behind him, blocking retreat. "We'll make it quick for the abominations. You, however, will die slowly. An example to any other humans who forget their place." Elena's mind raced. The passage was narrow, limiting how many could attack at once. Ash and Ember pressed against her legs, growing in fear and anger. "I've learned something these past months," Elena said, her hand dropping to the short sword at her belt. "Something your pride won't let you see. And what is that, human? That dragons think too much like dragons." She smiled coldly. "You expect honor, direct confrontation. You can't imagine the dirty tricks a desperate human will use." She threw a vial of oil at the floor between her and Carvax's forces, following it instantly with a spark from her flint. The passage erupted in flames. Not dragon fire, but good old human chemistry. In the confusion, Elena grabbed a torch and led the cubs deeper into the tunnels, taking turns the rebels wouldn't expect, doubling back, using every guerrilla tactic she'd learned during the human resistance. But Carvax was persistent. He split his forces, cut off routes, forced them toward a dead end. A massive cavern with no exit except the way they'd come. Elena turned, sword drawn, placing herself between the cubs and the 30 armed dragons now blocking the only way out. "You fought well," Carvax admitted, "but it ends here." "Yes," Elena agreed. "It does." She looked at Ash and Ember. They'd grown so much, were so strong now. Through the bond, she felt their fear but also their trust, their absolute faith that she would protect them. "I love you both," she whispered. "Remember that." Then she charged. She took down 2 dragons before they even realized she'd moved. The venom change had made her supernaturally fast, and she'd trained relentlessly. 3 more fell to precise strikes to vulnerable throat scales, but there were too many. A claw caught her shoulder, spinning her around. Another strike sent her crashing into the stone wall. Through blurring vision, she saw Carvax advancing on the cubs. "No!" she gasped, trying to rise. Ash and Ember stood side by side, no longer cowering. They were 4 months old, barely adolescent by dragon standards, but they looked at each other, some wordless communication passing between them, and Elena felt through the bond what they intended. "Don't," she tried to say. "You're too young." They breathed fire together. Not the small gouts they'd managed during the first assassination attempt. Real dragon fire. Massive and sustained, fueled by rage and love and the desperate need to protect what they cherished. The rebel dragons scattered, screaming. The flames didn't stop. Ash and Ember advanced, their fire merging into a single column of searing heat that drove the rebels back, until they broke and fled. Carvax stood his ground, protected by enchanted armor. Impressive, but insufficient. He raised his claws to strike the exhausted cubs. Valerix crashed through the ceiling. The Emperor had come with the full Imperial Guard, having fought through rebel positions throughout the palace. He was magnificent and terrible, every inch the ancient warrior king. His roar shook the cavern, dislodging stalactites that fell like spears. The battle was swift. Carvax fell, and his remaining forces surrendered. Valerix went immediately to his sons, checking them for injuries, his relief palpable. Then he turned to Elena, still slumped against the wall. "You led them here," he said softly, "into the deepest part of the mountain, the sacred cavern where emperors are crowned." Elena blinked, looking around properly for the first time. The walls were covered in ancient carvings, the history of the Dragon Empire etched in stone and precious metals. "I didn't know. I was just running. Or perhaps you were called." Valorix helped her to her feet gently. The cavern has not been opened to anyone outside the Imperial bloodline in 3,000 years. Yet it opened for you. Ash and Ember pressed against Elena's legs, exhausted but triumphant. Through the bond, she felt their love, their absolute certainty that she belonged with them, was part of them. The rebels are broken, Valorix continued, but they number nearly half the nobility. If I execute them all, the Empire will fracture. If I show too much mercy, the rebellions will continue. He paused, his ancient eyes studying her. I need a symbol, something to show both sides that there is a new path forward. What kind of symbol? You, Elena? Not as my consort. I will never take another mate, but as something the Empire has never seen. A human adopted into the Imperial bloodline. Not through marriage, not through conquest, but through the bond you share with my sons. Elena stared at him. You want to make me royalty? Me? A peasant from a burned village? I want to make you what you already are. Mother to the heirs. Guardian of the future. The bridge between our peoples. Valorix gestured to the ancient carvings. Look, the prophecies speak of the Bridgeborn. Twin heirs who would unite species or destroy them. I did not understand until now. They are the Bridgeborn, yes, but you are the bridge itself. Elena looked at Ash and Ember, at Valorix, at the assembled Imperial Guard watching with expressions ranging from awe to uncertainty. If I accept, the traditionalists will never forgive you. They will adapt or be replaced. The world is changing, Elena. The war between our species cannot continue. Either we find a new way, or we destroy each other completely. Valorix knelt, bringing himself to her eye level. Will you stand with us, with my sons? Will you be the bridge? Through the bond, Elena felt Ash and Ember's hope, their absolute trust. She thought of her village, still suffering under the weight of war. Of all the humans and dragons dying in a conflict neither side could win. Of Maya, her lost daughter, and these two dragon cubs who had somehow filled the hole in her heart. Yes, she said, I will. The coronation ceremony was conducted that night in the sacred cavern. Ancient rites were modified, adapted, made new. Elena knelt between Ash and Ember, as Valorix placed a circlet of silver and ruby on her head. Let it be known throughout the Empire, the Emperor declared. Elena Flame-Blessed is adopted into the Imperial bloodline, as guardian, protector, and eternal mother to the heirs Ashcarix and Embercarix. She is bridge builder, peacemaker, and first of her kind. Any who threaten her threaten the throne. Any who honor her honor the future. The Imperial Guard, whatever their private feelings, knelt in respect. The message would spread throughout the Empire by morning, but the real change came 3 days later, when Ash and Ember demonstrated something no dragon had ever done before. They were in the Great Hall, meeting with emissaries from the remaining noble houses, when a hardliner made one final attempt at protest. He challenged Elena's authority, her right to stand beside Valorix, her corrupting influence on the heirs. Ash and Ember, now old enough to speak but still awkward with the language, stepped forward in perfect synchronization. They didn't argue, they didn't threaten. Instead, they did something impossible. They shared their bond with the entire hall. Every dragon present suddenly felt what the cubs felt. Elena's love, fierce and unconditional. Her determination to protect them. Her grief for her lost daughter and the way these two had healed her. Her hope for a future where humans and dragons could coexist. And deeper, stranger, more powerful. They felt the cubs' perspective, how they saw Elena not as human or dragon but simply as mother. How the concept of species seemed arbitrary and meaningless compared to the bonds of love and loyalty. The psychic projection lasted only seconds, but it shattered something fundamental in the dragons who experienced it. They had felt human emotions as real and valid as their own, had experienced the love between Elena and the cubs as pure and powerful as any dragon parent-child bond. The hardliner fell to his knees, tears streaming down his scaled face. I understand, he whispered. Ancestors, forgive me, I understand. Valorix looked at his sons with wonder. Psychic bonding is a lost art. No dragon has managed it in a millennium. How did you? Elena taught us, Ash said simply. Not with words, with feelings. She shows us every day that love crosses boundaries. We just shared what she gave us. Elena felt her eyes burning. She hadn't taught them that consciously, but somehow, through the bond, they'd absorbed her deepest beliefs and made them their own. Over the following months, Ash and Ember shared their gift carefully, selectively, with key nobles and generals from both sides of the old conflict. Each time, the result was the same: understanding, empathy, the beginning of peace. Human ambassadors came to the palace, terrified and suspicious. The cubs shared their bond with them too, showing what Elena had become, how she was honored and protected. Slowly, carefully, treaties were negotiated. The war didn't end overnight. Too much blood had been spilled. Too much grief accumulated. But it began to end. Ceasefires became truces. Truces became trade agreements. Dragon magic started to heal human cities. Human technology began to improve dragon agriculture. And at the center of it all stood Elena. No longer human, not quite dragon, but something new. The bridge between worlds, the mother of the bridgeborn, the living proof that love could transcend even the deepest divisions. She stood on the palace balcony one evening, watching the sunset, with Ash and Ember flanking her. They were adolescent now, the size of horses, magnificent and powerful, but they still pressed close to her, still sought her comfort and guidance. "Do you ever regret it?" Valorix asked, joining them. "Your old life, your humanity." Elena thought of her village, now rebuilt and thriving under the new peace, of the human children who could grow up without fear of dragon raids, of the dragon hatchlings who would never know the necessity of war. "I lost my humanity," she said quietly. "But I gained something else. A family, a purpose." She smiled, scratching Ember behind his ear ridge while Ash rumbled contentedly. "No regrets." "Good," Valorix said. "Because I need you for another mission. The western provinces are still resistant to integration. They need to see what we've built here, to feel what the cubs can share." "Then we'll go," Elena said simply. Together, like always. Ash and Ember spread their wings, now large enough to carry her easily. She climbed onto Ash's back while Ember flew alongside, and together they launched into the evening sky. Below, dragons and humans worked side by side in the palace gardens, building something that had seemed impossible just months before. Peace, understanding, hope. Elena looked ahead toward the horizon, toward the challenges that still remained, the resistance they would face, the long, hard work of building lasting peace. But she wasn't afraid. She had her sons, she had her purpose, and she had proven beyond any doubt that humanity's greatest strength wasn't weapons or technology, or even courage. It was the capacity to love, fiercely and unconditionally, even the most unlikely of children, even dragons, even the future itself. The sunset painted the sky in shades of copper and gold, and Elena, flame-blessed first human queen mother of the Dragon Empire, flew toward it with her sons, ready for whatever came next. Together, they were unstoppable. Together, they were the bridge between worlds. Together, they were the proof that some bonds transcend everything, even species, even war, even death itself. And that was the most human thing of all.